Rushwood Center at Ryerson Woods presents the 37th Annual Smith Nature Symposium. Rushwood Center is located in the Ryerson Woods Forest Preserve in Riverwoods, Illinois, and honors this land as the traditional home of the Council of Three Fires. Today, Rushwood Center continues to be a place where many people from diverse backgrounds find healing, vitality, and relationship with nature. You can learn more and support this work at brushwoodcenter.org. Now is the time to create a more resilient tomorrow. This year, the Smith Nature Symposium series explores what it will take to build a more just and sustainable future in the aftermath of COVID-19. Welcome to the 37th Annual Smith Nature Symposium.
And now I am very excited to introduce our speakers for today. Thank you for bearing with me through all of that. First, I just want to quickly give a quick congratulations to Celeste, who this week was named one of Energy News Network's 40 under 40, but no big deal or anything. Both Celeste and Dulce are co-chairs of Clean Power Lake County. For those who don't know, Clean Power Lake County is a grassroots, community-driven coalition committed to local actions to secure environmental, economic, and racial justice. They are supported by several partners, including environmental, faith, and public health organizations. Celeste was born and raised in Lake County, Illinois, and has been a lifelong member of Most Blessed Trinity Parish. While a student at Bellarmine University in Kentucky, she witnessed devastation from mountaintop removal and became involved in the fight for environmental justice. When she returned to Lake County, she learned about the local efforts to Clean Power Lake County to ensure Waukegan had a just transition away from the coal-fired power plant on the shore of Lake Michigan. She currently serves as co-chair, as I mentioned earlier, along with Dulce, and is also the Lake County Outreach Director for Faith in Place. She was Senator Duckworth's guest for the State of the Union in 2020, and as I said, and I keep saying it because it's very exciting, was just named one of Energy News Network's 40 under 40 this week. Dulce Ortiz has worked tirelessly as the co-chair of Clean Power Lake County and has been with the organization since 2013 after learning about pollution from the Waukegan coal plant and how it contributed to poor air quality in Waukegan. Dulce herself has a mother who suffers from asthma, so she really understands the dangers of coal pollution and what it can do to someone's quality of life when it's in their community. Dulce has testified before both the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights and the Illinois Commission on Civil Rights for their study on the civil rights implications associated with placing coal ash facilities near low-income and minority communities. Dulce was also featured in the National Geographic Channel's Emmy Award-winning documentary series, Years of Living Dangerously. The season finale episode, titled Uprising, is an inspiring story of Clean Power Lake County and the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign. Obviously, these are two incredible activists, and we are so excited to have you both with us today. And that is enough of me talking, so please take it away.
Thank you so much, Sandy. And then we also have a poll for everyone. We just thought it would be fun to change things up. I know a lot of us are in a lot of Zoom meetings, and we kind of just wanted to see what people knew about Clean Power Lake County or the Waukegan area before. So if you could put that up, we'll give people 2 to 3 minutes. And if it's okay if you don't know the answer, make your best guess. And you do have to answer all of them in order to submit it. So it should be on your screen right now. We have a couple questions here, not too many, but just wanted to gauge what people knew already. Awesome, thank you so much. And we will go a little bit more into why the answers are what they are in the presentation. But for the first question, it was what grade did the American Lung Association give Lake County's air quality in their 2017 State of the Air Report? This is actually the same grade for 2018, 2019, and 2020 as well. And before 2017, it's an F. So I see that 25% of y'all got that right. The second one is according to the US EPA toxic release inventory, which of the following is the largest single point source of both air and water pollution in Lake County? And it is NRG's Waukegan coal plant. Third question is, according to the US EPA Protection Agency, living near a wet coal ash pond like those in Waukegan is more dangerous than smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. The youth that I worked with a couple years ago came up with these options, and I have just kept them because I thought they were just amazing. And I feel like it kind of gives it away, but I just love them. I love working with youth. And Illinois is home to, 11 EPA Superfund sites. And in Waukegan alone, we have 5 of those 11 Superfund sites. And the average retirement age for the coal plant in the United States is 53 years old, and the coal plant was built in the 1920s here in Waukegan, and the boilers are both over 60 years old. So it's long overdue for retirement. And then finally, according to the Soot to Solar report, which is a report that the Union of Concerned Scientists did all over the state, they were looking at coal communities. Their conclusion was that the Waukegan coal plant can be closed with no impacts on our electricity reliability. So thank you all for taking this. And with that, I will pass it over to Dulce Ortiz to begin the presentation.
Thank you so much, Celeste. If we can go to the next slide. Again, my name is Dulce Ortiz, one of the co-chairs here with Celeste for Clean Power Lake County. And as you guys can see, this is a picture of our beautiful lakefront. But if you continue to see a little bit far ahead, you see a couple of smokestacks. So that is where the coal plant in Waukegan is located. And as you guys saw in the results from the survey questions, of course, you know, this coal plant has a toxic legacy dating all the way back to the 1920s. And yes, it is the largest source in water pollution here in Lake County. This is one of the oldest coal plants in the state, but also one of the oldest in the country. The boilers are approximately 57 and 61 years old. And we know that the average retirement age for coal plants in the United States is 53 years old. So obviously it's way past its retirement date. So the question here is not if the coal plant will retire, but when the coal plant will retire. Can we go to the next slide, please? So Waukegan has a very painful and long history of and legacy of pollution that goes beyond the coal plant. As you guys answered in the survey, Waukegan is home to 5 EPA Superfund sites. As you can see here in the map, we have the Human Creek landfill, we have the Johns Mansville, the Outboard Marine, the North Shore Gas North Plant, and the North Shore Gas South Plant. And again, it's just one community with 5 Superfund sites when in the state there are 11. We have had corporate polluters just, abruptly abandon the lakefront, leaving us Waukegan residents to deal with the serious consequences, including contaminated sites, layoffs, and of course, less revenue for our community. We know what happens to our community when a company abruptly exits, and obviously we don't want this to happen again. And that's why we have Clean Power Lake County. So we can go to the next slide. So what is Clean Power Lake County? Well, Clean Power Lake County is a community-driven coalition committed to local action to secure environmental, economic, and racial justice. It is supported by several partners, including environmental, faith, and public health organizations. Our mission is to organize within frontline communities, environmental justice communities, to shift Lake County to a healthy, renewable energy. and to achieve the self-determination of immigrant, low-income, and working-class families. We are committed to advancing systematic equity, consciously creating, sustaining, and supporting social justice as we work to achieve our campaign goals. We're committed to building a movement whose leadership reflects its constituency, community leaders of color from Waukegan and other environmental justice communities. Our vision is to build a sustainable community that promotes the healthy development of all Lake County communities, specifically those that are most vulnerable, immigrant, low-income, and working-class families, by addressing environmental justice, practicing participatory democracy, advancing self-determination, and empowering people of color. Our goals are the following. We want to secure a retirement date for the coal-fired power plant in Waukegan. We want to establish a just transition for local workers, including retraining for clean energy jobs. Collaborate with stakeholders in productive conversations about the sale and reuse of the lakefront site, including necessary remediation of coal ash ponds on the site, and identify opportunities for energy efficiency and clean energy projects that can create jobs for local residents and tax revenue for Waukegan and Lake County. Next slide, please. So again, the Waukegan coal plant is the largest air polluter in Lake County. You know, as Danny mentioned, my mother suffers from asthma. I myself also suffer from asthma, and this is why I became so involved, because we know that the pollution coming from this coal plant makes it harder for people to breathe. The coal plant is the largest emitter of carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide here in Lake County. And unfortunately, these pollutants contribute to asthma attacks, birth defects, cardiovascular disease, chronic bronchitis, heart attacks, lung cancer, strokes, and premature deaths. As you can see here, we have some statistics. Now, these statistics are from 2018. We don't have any updated ones, but each year this polluter contributes to 18 deaths, 5 hospital admissions, 7 asthma-related ER visits, 11 heart attacks, 4 cases of chronic bronchitis, 118 asthma attacks, and 871 work loss days. I think one of the things for me that impacted me the most was I have 2 children, and I learned from one of the reports that was conducted by the Lake County Health Department and another organization that the children in Waukegan suffer, 1 out of 3 suffer from asthma or asthma-like symptoms. And so that is a devastating, number, especially for us residents that have children here in Waukegan. And so that's why we are very active in making sure that, there is cleaner air and that we don't get left with the pollution from this coal plant when and if it does retire. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is the Waukegan coal plant. It's owned by Energy. They are based out of New Jersey and Texas, and they are actually one of the largest power producers in the country and is among the top 3 carbon emitters in the country. Energy is investing in clean energy in some parts of the country, but not in the Midwest or Illinois. And we just found out, I believe a couple of years ago, they actually shifted their business plan to focus more on fossil fuels, and they pretty much almost sold all of their renewable portfolio. So again, they make themselves seem like they're good neighbors, and they're very concerned about their public image. They donate to a lot of community organizations. They also make donations to elected officials. They sponsor community events. But we know that at the end of the day, all they care about is their investors, their shareholders, and how much money they are making off of the health adversities of Waukegan residents and people that live right here in Lake County. And so as long as they are profiting, they're going to continue to pollute our community. So we have to make sure that we hold them accountable. Celeste?
Yeah, and I think continuing with what we've seen, really it has to be community members that have become experts and all of these things, and we've had to rely on partnerships. We've had to rely on ourselves and science. Everything we're trying to share with you are facts that there was some kind of report done in these types of years, and I think that's one of the most powerful tools we have as community members, is unfortunately having to hold corporations accountable because they are not a good neighbor to our communities and claim to be, but the science tells us something different. So another big problem we have here that we've been actively working on is coal ash. Coal ash is the byproduct of burning coal. And in this map, you see that we actually have a lot of coal ash ponds in Waukegan. We have 2 active and a lot of historical ones. And what you're seeing in this map is also that this coal plant is surrounded by Superfund sites, and NRG has tried putting blame on other corporations that are long gone for the pollution in our water. So we have actively been working with our other partners like Sierra Club, Union of Concerned Scientists, Earth Justice, and I'm missing a lot more, but in suing and making sure that they are actually holding this company accountable, because this coal plant has never been issued an operating permit in compliance with the Clean Air Act amendment of the 1990s. When we look at coal ash, it has violations as well. So it's really important that we are holding these companies accountable, that we're analyzing things in a way that is real and authentic. And coal ash is very dangerous, and we are working actively to mitigate this, to address this, and we were part of a much larger coalition that actually in 2019 was able to get the Coal Ash Pollution Prevention Act passed. And this legislation, for the first time, is putting corporations accountable. A lot of the times what we've seen historically, Illinois is coal country. It's got mining, it's got coal plants, it has everything. And what we have seen is that these companies say, we have the money, don't worry, we're going to do the cleanup. We got you, look at all this money we have in our bank account. And what we have seen for our brothers and sisters that live south of us is that they decide they're going to retire the coal plant, and then all of a sudden there is no money for the cleanup of these coal ash ponds, which are contaminated, which have mercury, which have all these different toxic chemicals. And once we have this product, it's kind of like styrofoam and plastic. There's nothing really good we can do about it. I know that there's some technology to recycle styrofoam, but we should just not be producing this in the first place. And that's what we're advocating for. And so this bill is going to be making these companies put money aside outside of the account that they already have, of whatever funding they have, so that they actually take responsibility and do what the community wants. If the community wants this coal ash cleaned up and move somewhere else, for that to happen. If the community wants the coal ash to stay there, for the coal ash to stay there. But this was a huge step, because we saw in 2016 how important it was to have state legislation, because at the federal level, a lot of things can be taken back. And that's what we have seen. The EPA at the federal level systematically rolled back all the protections it has in place for our communities, like Waukegan. And that's why we fought so hard to pass this legislation, to make sure that we are not with that the state and this agency is not being held to federal standards that are being wiped away. So this was part of a larger coalition. You see there, Senator Scott Bennett was our champion. You see Dulce in that picture. You see other people in those pictures. This was an effort that was done across the state. And as a group that's made up of all volunteers, we have more power with more people. And when we connect with other groups, either if they are nonprofits or they are also just group of volunteers, we are stronger together, and we're going to Springfield and advocating on behalf of everyone. So we're actually not done. The one thing you'll learn if you try to make a positive change in your community is that it's a lot harder than it should be. And it's been set up in a way where it benefits you know, how this country was formed for white men that own property. That is the systemic issue of everything, I believe. And if it's not enough to pass legislation, then you have to implement it, enforce it, and make sure that the right agencies are doing what the bill said. So that's exactly what we're doing right now, is that we are in the middle of making sure that the Illinois Pollution Control Board actually make sure that they're going to enforce these rules that the Coal Ash Pollution Prevention Act has. So we're actually still looking for people that are willing to tell the Illinois Pollution Control Board, hey, I think it's really important that community members have a say in how coal ash is handled in their community. I think it's really important that there is translation in these meetings, just like Brushwood has provided today here with an interpreter. So if you want to learn more about that, I'm happy to talk to you offline. This is going to be happening at the end of this month, and Dulce Ortiz is actually one of our expert witnesses at this. So if you want to hear her have to say her thing and get questioned by the Illinois Pollution Control Board, that will be on September 30th at 9 a.m. But we have these slots for community members to just say what they're thinking. We have talking points because we have amazing lawyers from other nonprofits that have gone through and read everything and say, hey, we think this is missing. What do you think? So like I said, it's a group effort, and Clean Power Lake County is really proud to be a part of this. And like Dulce alluded to, there's a lot more than just our main focus, and how Clean Power Lake County came about was because we've learned about this coal plant in our lakefront. But recently in 2018, we also learned about ethylene oxide. So I won't go into all the details of ethylene oxide, but we did want to raise it up that a lot of the times environmental justice communities, we are dealing with a lot more than just one thing. What I call is cumulative impact. And I think that a lot of our legislation, a lot of our policies don't take that into place. They will allow one kind of pollution to happen, like the coal plant in Waukegan, and then allow another kind of pollution to happen, like ethylene oxide, which is being omitted in Medline, but in Waukegan. And because they're two different types of chemicals, there's two different things. When we're looking at the map, or when people are looking at policy, like, oh yeah, Waukegan's fine, right? But we're not, because we have all of this cumulative impact. We have all these different sources of pollution that are impacting our lungs, our respiratory. So this was just an added burden to something with things we were all dealing with. And it could have not come in a worse time to learn that I've been living for years miles away from breathing this class 1 carcinogen that mutates your DNA and can cause all these types of cancers, can cause all these other issues. So we've been trying to learn more about this and really understand how we can safely phase this out and start and have these corporations use other chemicals or use another product, because we recognize in environmental justice communities that it's not just about getting rid of things, but knowing what's best for us. And a lot of the times we see economics and our health pinned against each other, and that's not the way it should be. They should be working hand in hand. Our government agencies, these corporate pollution, these corporate these corporate employers need to make sure that they that we're working together for the betterment of our community. So we need to make sure that we just continue to educate ourselves and know what is happening in our community. And I think that's exactly what Clean Power Lake County has tried doing. We have been working and talking with, and I can't, with community members. We've been working with community members trying to decide what does our future look like? What are the things we want to be doing? And those are real conversations we have. They're difficult, but they're so meaningful, and it takes time. And I think a lot of the times, especially in the corporate world, I work for Faith and Blaze, an environmental organization, and I work with a lot of other nonprofits. People want to do things really fast because they just want to get something done. They're like, this is the problem, let's find a solution. And it's not always that simple, especially when you're trying to work with community members that this is not their job. They have a 9-to-5 job, and they also have a family, and they also have church, or they have, other obligations. And it takes time to build these relationships and to be trusted. We saw, Dulce share about the history of industry coming in, giving us jobs, and then taking them away. That kind of stuff isn't forgotten easily. So people have a lot of distrust when things happen. So for us, it's really important to have those conversations and take the time to really think through how are we envisioning a future together. And some of the conclusions that we've come up with is that we want to make sure we're moving towards 100% renewable energy, but in an equitable way, in a way where our brothers and sisters that have been, for any reason, put through anything can be a part of this. We're looking to make sure that our own community is the one that's getting jobs and getting trained for these types of jobs. We're looking for people that are coming back from the system to be able to gain employment. We're looking for women. We're looking for people of color to be able to join unions. I mean, unions are an amazing thing, and I advocate for them all the time. But unions can also have a history of leaving out the most vulnerable people. And how do we fight for that not to keep happening? So there's just some of the things that we've envisioned. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dulce again.
And how do we do that? If we can go to the next slide. So with the Clean Energy Jobs Act, one of the things that we learned, I personally have learned through this journey of just really having basic human rights, of having clean air, having clean water, having a community that's thriving in economic development. It's difficult. It's difficult when you have to, sort of like beg and fight and plead for these basic rights. And one of the things that we learned is that, there's powers in numbers, like Celeste mentioned. And also, we have to make sure that we have a seat at the table when these policies are being created for different bills, different legislation that's going through the legislature. Because if we're not involved, then we have individuals thinking what it's best for us and not really engaging the people that are being mostly affected, right? The most vulnerable environmental justice communities. And so Clean Power Lake County, we are part of the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition. The Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition is made up of organizations representing the state's environmental, business, and faith communities. We are a coalition that's working to improve public health, help consumers to help better the environment, and create tens of thousands of new clean jobs across the state. How do we achieve this? Well, right now we're working on passing the Clean Energy Jobs Act. and we call it CEJA for short. So the Clean Energy Jobs Act is pretty much the only comprehensive climate bill focused on equitable job creation, consumer protections, and economic recovery, and the only bill written with communities in mind. We know as Illinois faces an economic and public health crisis, a racial and economic justice crisis, and a crisis of utility corruption, the urgency to pass the Clean Energy Jobs Act has never been greater. We know that the Clean Energy Jobs Act addresses the urgent need to provide aid for communities of color most impacted by COVID-19 pandemic, and the need for significant new reforms to put an end to utility-friendly policies in Illinois. And also in the face of a Trump administration bailing out the fossil fuel industry and addressing the climate crisis in Illinois is long overdue. And so we can go to the next slide. So we have also polled our own community members here in Waukegan, and we found out that 75% of Waukegan voters wanted more electricity from solar energy, and 52% of voters wanted less energy from coal. With the Clean Energy Jobs Act, we also held hundreds of listening sessions throughout Illinois to ensure that CEJA meets the needs of real people. Here in Waukegan, I know we held a couple of listening sessions. As Celeste mentioned, you know, what is it that we're envisioning for our future? We can go to the next slide. So we know that with the abandoned sites that we currently have, we know that they can be turned into clean energy farms, right? But not only that, what CEJA does, it creates energy access and solar for all. CEJA is specifically designed to bring additional benefits to vulnerable and overburdened communities, and it will create $2 billion of investments in low-income and environmental justice communities by 2030. So we want to make sure that, you know, clean energy projects are being prioritized to communities like Waukegan. As you guys can see, we have 5 Superfund sites. What we want to do is we want to make sure that, you know, we're able to use those sites for clean energy, and make sure that, you know, for the coal plant, one of the pillars of CEJA is also to be 100% carbon-free power by 2030. And so how the Clean Energy Jobs Act would do this, it would transition Illinois' power sector completely away from fossil fuels by 2030, support workers and communities impacted by the decline of coal, and significantly expand clean energy generation and good-paying clean energy jobs in our state. We know that extreme heat and flooding have already cost Illinois more than $6.5 billion and hundreds of lives in recent decades. So if no action is taken, by 2050, climate change will cost nearly 1,200 deaths and more than $6 billion in damage each year in the Midwest. Can we go to the next slide? So, how do we build grassroots power? And we do that together. We know that we are stronger, and we can make a difference in numbers, and that's how all the goals that we have achieved with Clean Power Lake County. Obviously, Celeste and I couldn't do it on our own. We're being uplifted by hundreds of volunteers, hundreds of supporters, and we have been working for the past 7 years to build a movement by talking to families, talking to neighbors, congregations, and not just specifically focusing on Waukegan, right? That's why we call Clean Power Lake County, but engaging communities all over Lake County. We've also collected thousands of postcards, attended energy shareholders meetings, testified at hearings, held marches, rallies, and also build relationships with our elected officials. And so we know that the Clean Energy Jobs Act, it's something that we desperately need, not only for environmental justice communities, but as a parent, you know, I think about my children. I think about the legacy that I want to leave behind. I think about, you know, what future they're going to have. I would love for them to stay in Waukegan, but unfortunately, that's not going to happen if we can continue to subsidize fossil fuels, if we continue to empower these corporate polluters to continue making profits off of, you know, Waukegan residents that have their share burden of health disparities, that have their share burden of, you know, educational issues in the educational system, criminal justice system. So we want to make sure that we all work together, because at the end of the day, passing the Clean Energy Jobs Act is going to help not only Waukegan residents, it's going to not only help Lake County residents, it's not only going to help the state of Illinois residents, it's really us putting our best foot forward in helping our environment and making sure that people have the basic rights to breathe clean air and drink clean water. So we want you to get involved. If we can go to the next slide. We ask that you please follow us on social media. We have a Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram page. Also, if you want to be part of our listserv, you want to remain involved and see what we're up to, please email cleanpowerlc@gmail.com. We'll go ahead and add you to our distribution list. Also, we have a campaign going on of CJ Cannot Wait. I know that Leah is one of our interns that's helping us with this campaign. She's actually a participant here. Well, not a participant, but I know that she's watching us. So feel free to email Celeste if you want to get involved, you know, reach out to us. Again, we're trying to pass the Clean Energy Jobs Act during the veto session this November. That is our goal. But again, we have to work with the elected officials and legislators to make sure that this happens. And I'll pass it back to Celeste.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, Danny, I don't know if you want us to do questions and answers. I think the last thing I'll add is just the importance of allyship and knowing your role in any kind of movement you're in. I think we have seen a lot since March, and I think we've seen a real need for real movement in racial justice, and I think Clean Power Lake County is more committed than ever to making sure that any kind of environmental justice work we do is interconnected with Black Lives Matter and any other racial injustices that we see here in the area. So I think there's a spot for everyone, and we're going to need everyone because there's still a lot of money in politics, and corporations still have a lot of money. And if you guys are from Illinois, you have been seeing a lot of that going on at the state level and with ComEd as well. So I think just the importance of knowing if you're going to be volunteering, understanding the history of the areas, and working genuinely, showing up in the best way you can, and also being willing to take direction from people on the ground.
Amazing. I want to quickly thank you both, Celeste and Dulce, for this presentation. This is such vital information, and everyone needs to be aware of these issues as they impact Waukegan, as they impact Lane County, and the greater, the greater area, the state. As you said, Dulce, this isn't just our issue, our regional issue. We do have some audience questions. If you don't mind, we've got lots of curious folks from this conversation. I'll start with one that's probably going to be some good background. Someone asked, what exactly is a coal ash pond? I don't know who wants to take that, but feel free to chime in.
Yeah, so coal ash is the byproduct of burning coal. And what happens is that these companies have to get rid of this, right, because they're burning the coal to make energy. So they funnel it with water into what is it, like a reservoir, and it kind of looks like a pond. So that's why we call it coal ash pond. But depending on the community, on the city, they can look very differently. And some of them are called impoundments. Here in Waukegan, we say pond, but it's just the byproduct of the coal because they need to get rid of it. And what they do is that they just let it sit in this water, and they've like carved out a space for it. And what happens is that the coal ash, the chemicals of it leak into the ground, which eventually gets to our, what's the word? There's to the water.
Groundwater.
Groundwater. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying. We have another question. Dulce, I'll ask you. Someone's interested in watching the docu-series that you and CPLC were a part of. Do you know, is there a way that people can watch that now?
There is a way, Celeste. I think you know more than I do on this one.
I believe it's on Amazon Prime. And I think Years of Being Dangerousness, it's with National Geographic as well. So it might be on their website too.
Awesome. I can always look into it too and send out the info to our email and maybe boost it on social media too. That sounds awesome. We have a question from Tanisha Harris. How has COVID contributed to aggravating health issues caused by the Waukegan coal plant? And is anyone tracking this to your knowledge?
So I think that, one of the things that we have to keep in mind when it comes to Waukegan is that most of our residents are, minorities, and we know that we already have health disparities there. We already had health disparities, not only because they're minorities, because they either have inadequate access to health care or no health care at all. But then on top of that, we do have a coal plant that's emitting all these toxics. Then we do have a higher percentage of individuals that have asthma or asthma-like symptoms. And in addition to that, when Celeste is talking about cumulative impact, now we have a pandemic that's COVID-19. And so here in Lake County, back in May, when it was at its worst, we knew that Latinos were being affected. The ratio of infection was 9 Latinos compared to their 1 Caucasian counterparts. So 9 out of 1 were being infected by COVID-19. Right now, that number sits at 6 to 1. For African Americans, it was 5 to 1. Now that number has decreased 3 to 1. So as you guys can see, there is disproportionate impact on minority communities. Fortunately, at this time, we're not tracking, how it correlates with the coal plant. But we know that the coal plant for, all these years, they've been the largest source of pollution. Even without the pandemic, our community members have suffered health disparities. And so with this pandemic, it's really just exacerbating, all of these issues even more.
Absolutely. I think this pandemic has shown a lot of people the health inequities that we've known have existed for decades, but now are much harder to ignore when we have the compounding impact of this global pandemic on top of them. We had another question related to kind of one of our quiz questions in terms of energy reliability without the coal plant. Someone asked, if we don't have coal, how do we generate electricity? With solar power, does solar power still work on cloudy or gloomy days? We have a lot of those in Illinois. I don't know who wants to tackle solar power questions, but go for it.
Yeah, so Germany actually has, I don't know what percentage they have of renewable energy, and especially solar. And we get the same amount of sunlight as they do. So I was on a webinar earlier this week, and Christian Mitchell, who's the deputy governor for Illinois, Jimmy Ritzker, he actually said this too, and he said that Illinois can and needs to move to solar energy. So I think even on those cloudy days, the sun comes through, and we're working every day, other people, but I advocate for it, for batteries that are sustainable and that are being created in an equitable way and in a way that isn't mining minerals. So especially looking at that and making sure that communities are transitioning to solar in an equitable way. So having a lot of solar panels, but also having those batteries to be able to save energy for those days you don't use it. So I absolutely think it's 100% doable here. And fun fact, the coal plant here in Waukegan, it doesn't go directly to give energy to the community in Waukegan or even Lake County. It goes on this like imaginary grid where the electricity goes to, so it doesn't even directly power us, but solar actually would.
Awesome. Yeah, I hear this a lot too with solar energy. There's a lot of misconceptions that are pushed, I think on purpose in a lot of areas, that solar is just not reliable, but technology has been advancing every year. So there's definitely workarounds for the cloudy days, which we've had quite a few of this year. We had another question related to the ethylene dioxide leak from Medline. We know that this is a chemical used to sterilize medical equipment. Do you know of any other alternatives, or is there a better way that Medline could be blocking its emissions, or should it just be moved to a less populated area, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think, so Medline specifically uses it to sterilize medical equipment. It kind of depends on the industry, what they do, and I know I didn't go into all the details. I think what we need to do is phase this out and not use ethylene oxide anymore. I don't think, because it goes into the air, and air is not stagnant. So even it's just not safe for humans, right? I mean, we stop using other things that are class 1 carcinogens. So I think what we have seen at the federal level, but is very slow to start, because at the moment, the federal level is not on the side of environmentalists and people that care about health or racial justice. They have started a whole process to incentivize these corporations, these companies, to find safer alternatives. And I think that is what we really need to be pushing for, is to finding those and making sure they go through the proper procedures and the proper process to make sure that we can use that in mass quantities and to sterilize things. So I think another world is possible. I think a lot of the times as human beings, we're very used to doing what we have done in the past, or we cook a certain way because that's the way we were taught. Sometimes there's no reason for it. It was just like, that's just how you do it. And sometimes it works, and other times it's not okay. So I think really investing in that and putting that onus on the companies. You know, Medline says they want to be a good neighbor and they want to stay in our community. Great, we welcome you, but we don't want you to be poisoning our air. And it's a class 1 carcinogen, so there's no safe levels for humans to be breathing this in. So you want to be a good neighbor, you want to have these jobs here, then do it in a way where you're not poisoning us. So it is there are processes, and happy to go more into detail offline about those.
Awesome. I would say not poisoning your neighbor is a pretty like good baseline, good neighbor requirement. Whitney says, your presentation contains so much insight on both current and historical issues involved in securing intersectional environmental justice. I love the phrasing of that, so I wanted to read it verbatim. Would you have any other background resources on environmental justice issues in Lake County or in general that you would recommend people check out?
Yeah, I think I would personally recommend, if you want to learn about the history of Waukegan and the lakefront, it's called Lake Effect. I actually have it right over there, by Nancy Nicholas. That's a great book that gives you kind of the lay of the land when people started finding out that we have asbestos on our lakefront and those Superfund sites. I don't know if I'm sure if you go into like the Waukegan historians, and you can read some other stuff, but I don't know if there's other books like that specifically to Waukegan. I know John Wasick, who's a Lake County board member, has also written a couple books that I haven't read. I should probably read.
I'm going to tell him you said that.
Tell him. Maybe he'll send me some free copies.
Autograph.
Yes, that's what I want. Dulce, I don't know. Do you know of any other books or recommendations?
I don't, but I would also recommend that you check out when it comes to environmental justice issues. You know, our sister organization, Little Village Environmental Justice Organization, El Vejo, they have really gone through so much, especially this year. And it all began when they began their campaign to retire their coal plant, which was, you know, many, many years ago. And they retire the coal plant, but still to this day, they're still fighting for, again, just the basic right to breathe clean air. And it's extremely sad. Maybe some of you even remember watching on the news where they are, so they're trying to put I believe it's a warehouse that's going to go there. And so they were working on the old coal plant to demolish it in the middle of a pandemic. And they didn't give a lot of notice to the residents. The city of Chicago approved the permit. They said they didn't approve it. I mean, they're going back and forth because they don't want to take responsibility, but they demolished, I believe it was one of the smokestacks. And it just created this huge cloud of just dust. And of course, with everything that has been there for several years, all this toxics, it went right into the community. You did hear about, you know, different residents suffering different, you know, health issues because of, you know, that dust cloud that went in there. And so again, when we talk about environmental justice communities, you know, we know that we're like the sacrificial lamb for everything. And so I would highly recommend that you guys look into, you know, what El Vejo has been going through and how they've been dealing with all of that.
Yeah, maybe one day I'll make Dulce write a book.
Yes, that is what we need. There was one last question that I know it's 3 o'clock and I don't want to go too far over our time, but someone asked, what happens to Waukegan if CEJA doesn't pass this year? And this can obviously become a very sad question really quickly, but I want us to frame this as what's not going to happen because we're going to pass CEJA this year. So what in this fantasy world where we don't pass this bill is the result?
We got to keep organizing. We got to keep educating the community and, you know, working with the amazing volunteers that we have to continue advocating. I mean, depending on why it wouldn't pass in veto session, what I think make us pivot as to what we need to do. And, you know, personally, y'all probably have already picked up on this. I'm the one type of person that is ready to burn things down and change systems. So if we need to start showing up and teaming up with Sunrise or some other of these youth movement-led organizations in Illinois, I think the youth of Clean Power Lake County are ready. So I think it would depend on what the reasons were and what is our outside and inside game. And those are very organizer terms. I'm so sorry.
And just to add non-organizer terms, you know, I think when you're involved in this work, you get a lot of losses more than wins. And I think that our community, our volunteers, our supporters have become more resilient, right? So that if we encounter a barrier or a hiccup, it doesn't matter. We keep it moving, we keep going. We don't lose that hope and we don't lose that goal. So for us, you know, when originally when the coal plant was being sold from Midwest Generation to Energy, I thought, you know, they have to close it down. This coal plant is not profitable. It's like ages like old. It is just not, you know, it's not a good business plan to me, right? But then we found out that they were not going to close it. And I think that was like super devastating. But again, you kind of learn to move through those, hiccups or barriers, and you just don't give up. You keep it moving.
Absolutely. Well, I am incredibly grateful to both of you for giving us your time today, for sharing this information, for the work you do and have been doing for so long now and will continue doing, the people you've inspired, the groups you lead. I am just so glad that we had this chance to have you guys talk to our audience. And I hope folks listening, you're inspired to follow Clean Power Lake County online, to join their mailing list, to come out to some of their events, and get involved. This series is meant to inspire us to create a just and sustainable future out of our transition out of COVID-19. And one of the best ways you can do that is to get organized on a local level, learn what people are doing on the ground in your community, in your neighborhood, and join the fight. It's well worth it, and you'll be amongst some really incredible minds like Dulce and Celeste, which is a reward in and of itself. But thank you again, both of you, for spending your time with us today.
Yeah, I just want to thank Brushwood, Danny. It's been amazing collaborating with you, and for everyone that joined, thank you all so much. And yeah, I saw some people in the chat, so I'll follow up with you, Rosemary, and always feel free to email me and, follow us on social media and figure out what we're doing. We're meeting virtually, so, you can always join those meetings.
I just want to echo Celeste's comment. Just thank you so much for having us, Danny, Brushwood Center. We're completely honored and humbled by the invitation.